The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. That we have each other, and for that we have each other, and we will rise, we will rise, we will rise, oh, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again, and we'll rise up. I like the waves. We'll rise up in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our third police town hall. Last October, we hosted Chief John Merciades from Plymouth Township. Last spring, we hosted Chief Christopher Ward from White Marsh Township. And tonight, we are happy to welcome Conshohocken Police Chief George Metz to our Zoom. He is joined by Mayor Yaniv Aronson. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This session is being recorded. It is not being live streamed. We ask that you mute yourself if you are not muted already, but feel free to keep your camera on at the beginning. Hopefully you can recognize the faces of your neighbors and friends and say hi. When our intros are finished, we ask the camera goes off so that the focus is on the speakers. Our chat will be open so you can message the event hosts only. Please feel free to submit your questions or feedback at any point. It will go to one of us. We will read them. You do not need to resubmit questions you submitted advanced during registration. I'd like to introduce myself quickly. My name is Bridget Gail. I'm a Plymouth meeting resident. I've lived here over 10 years with my kids and my husband. I am very fortunate to be a part of CAARSEA, which originated in June 2020. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, CAARSEA stands for the Colonial Area Anti-Racism and Social Equity Alliance. CAARSEA was born the week after the heinous police murder of George Floyd in May 2020. Many people gathered in Miles Park for Circle in the Park. Perhaps some of you were there. We knelt for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to signify the amount of time Mr. Floyd had a knee on Mr. Floyd's the amount of time that Mr. Floyd had a knee on his neck. This was an event quite unique to Plymouth, White Marsh, Conshohocken area. And on that evening, a small group of residents decided that that could not be the case anymore. We must demonstrate that advocating for Black Lives Matter needs to be a daily occurrence, not a passing event or an annual acknowledgement. So a Facebook group was formed a few days later, and today that Facebook forum is comprised of more than 1,100 residents from Conshohocken, Plymouth, White Marsh, and surrounding neighborhoods. And we come together to elevate the voices of our Black and Brown neighbors here in the colonial area. Just to talk a little bit about the CAARSEA mission, as you can see on the screen now, the vision of CAARSEA is for the colonial area to be united to overcome racial injustice, where diversity is welcome, encouraged, celebrated, and valued. We work together to create and support systemic change at a local level in areas such as the schools, police, and government structures. We respond directly to issues of discrimination, racism, and social inequity in our community. We raise awareness, model and facilitate courageous conversation, and provide resources for community learning and engagement. Next slide, Monica. Thanks. Tonight's purpose: increase awareness, understanding, and community among residents of colonial area. Discuss community members' concerns regarding officers' interactions with people of color. Identify opportunities for community members to hold the Conshohocken Township Police accountable for the equitable treatment of all people within our community. Our agenda: welcome, which we're welcoming. Our CAARSEA overview. I will have the opportunity and honor to introduce our moderator, Gail Plant, and Gail will then introduce Chief and the Mayor. Our part one will be questions from the CAARSEA community, which came through already. Part two will be a video vignette with questions, and then part three will be questions that you send throughout the program. Some guidelines for community engagement. We've all been on Zoom long enough, so we kind of know the drill, but please mute your audio and video so that everybody's attention can be on the chief, the mayor, and Gail. Engage in the event by using the chat and the reaction functions if you see fit, and interruptions of the speakers this evening are not welcome. Speak from the I perspective, steer away from using generalizations or stereotypes, assume the best in others, and this is a judgment-free zone. All perspectives should be respected. And with that, I introduce Gail Plant. Gail is a proud wife and mother to 3 beautiful daughters, along with their 4-year-old I don't know if I'm saying this right, Maltipoo?
Yes.
Dog. Gail's family is one of her most joyous and proudest accomplishments. Gail was raised in urban Philadelphia community and attended Philadelphia public school system for her middle and high school years. Gail received her bachelor's degree from Drexel in computer information science. Immediately following graduation, she began her career at Vanguard, where she recently retired after 27 years of service. Gail received her master's in leadership development in 2015. And that same year, she ignited her passion of event planning and launched Miscellaneous, her very own event planning business. Also in 2020, she launched Dive Consulting, Diversity, Inclusion, Value for Everyone, where she is able to fulfill her passion for helping individuals and organizations embrace the uniqueness of humanity by promoting the value in all of us. Gail has lived in the colonial area for 16 years. She has over 20 years of experience in community activism in Philadelphia and other surrounding areas. When the call of action was presented to Gail to join CAARSEA, with no hesitation, she answered with a firm yes. She believes that all citizens should have equitable opportunities. Her involvement with community programs throughout her life has aided in the emergence of her passion to join CAARSEA in bringing social equity in the community. Gail currently holds the co-director police liaison position as part of our board of directors. When she leaves this earth, her aspiration is to have inspired all to open their minds and embrace all that God has planned for themselves, the community, the country, and the world. I give you our moderator, our lovely moderator, and my friend, Gail Plant.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate that. So I will jump right in and I will introduce Chief George Metz and then followed by Mayor Yaniv Aron. I'm going to say it wrong. Aronson. If I didn't say that right, I apologize. So I'll start with Chief Metz. Chief Metz is serving in his 38th year as a police officer, all with the Bureau of Conshohocken Police Department. Born in Conshohocken and a graduate of Plymouth White Marsh Senior High School, he was appointed to the police department in 1985. He has held the rank of sergeant and lieutenant before becoming the chief of the department in 2018. Chief Metz is a United States Marine and former correctional officer. He graduated from the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command in 2015. Chief Metz served in SWAT for 11 years and is a firearms and use of force instructor. George resides in Plymouth Township, is married, and has adult children and stepchildren. He enjoys all things outdoors. Welcome to the CAARSEA Town Hall, Chief. And now, Mayor. Yaniv Aronson was a career and technical education teacher for 7 years at Northeast High School, the biggest and most diverse high school in the school district of Philadelphia. In 2016, he was chosen as a Stanford University Hollyhock Fellow, a program that admits high school teachers from under-resourced school districts from across the country who are interested in creating equitable access and opportunities for all learners. He received his master's in education from St. Joe's University and doctorate in education from Immaculata University, with a dissertation focused on female student persistence in STEM college programs. He currently teaches media at the Montgomery County Community College and is attending Temple University for a master's in career and technical education administration. Yaniv has been the mayor of Conshohocken since 2018 and has served the Bureau as a member of the Environmental Advisory Council and Council Liaison for the Conshohocken Dog Park Committee and the Friends of Conshohocken Parks. Yaniv has helped to create the biannual Conshohocken Community Cleanup, SRT Bike Safety Class, ID Theft Protection Class, Hands-Only CPR, Annual Community Shredding Event, the annual Conshohocken Arts Festival and Car Show, and the Conshi Strong Initiative, which supports residents, businesses, and nonprofits affected by COVID-19 pandemic and the flooding that occurred in September of 2021. He is married to his wonderful wife, Sarah, and they are expecting their first child in January. Welcome, Mayor, and congratulations on your first child, welcoming your first child very soon. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in and get started. For the agenda, we're going to start with some prepared questions that were already submitted. So we're going to talk a little bit about, and I took the liberty of putting these into themes. And so policing history is our first question, set of questions. So if you can, Chief, this question is directed towards you. If you can tell us what are some lessons learned or changes to policy policing you've made as a reaction to racial tension and or specifically the George Floyd death.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me start a little bit before George Floyd. I've been around a long time, and a lot of things happened in my career leading up to this moment. And I'll give you an example. In my career, Rodney King happened. Now, some of you in attendance tonight might not know much about it because it was such a long time ago, but it was a big moment. It was, in my opinion, the first time in this country's history that John Q. Public witnessed something that the police committed and said, maybe the police were the problem here. You know, maybe this is maybe this wasn't right. And it was unique in that aspect. It was also early on in like VHS cameras and things like that, and it was captured, which was unique. But at the time when that happened, I watched that myself, and being an East Coast cop, you know, I along with my colleagues, we couldn't understand why they kept hitting this guy, you know. But the Los Angeles Police Department, they backed their officers. That was the most unique part of it, and said, no, this is how we train them, right? We trained them to do this. Well, they were ultimately convicted in federal court of violating Rodney King's civil rights. And I guess my point being, that being a catalyst for change, the Los Angeles Police Department backed those officers and said, no, we don't have a problem. They were within policy. This is how we trained them. You won't find that in any police department, including the city of Los Angeles today. You know, that type of attitude. They've gotten the cultural change that caused in the police departments. So George Floyd is a recent example of something, but the police, in my opinion, and that prompted like the cops grants and stuff like that, community policing back during the Clinton administration, that were all geared towards, you know, making the profession more progressive and responsive and sensitive to these things. And the change really started then. And I guess when that happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I would suspect that there was violations of their policy at the time. You know, like they weren't condoning this behavior by Salvan. They never stood behind him. And that was an act of an officer that was, you know, I'm reluctant to call him an officer. He was more like a sociopath, as far as I was concerned, to have that lack of empathy for someone and to do something that made no sense. So, you know, this has been going on my entire career, basically, you know, the police being looked at and the police reacting and trying to make changes. George Floyd specifically, how that that affected us, meaning the Conshohocken Police Department and me personally, was, you know, I watched that and witnessed what happened there just like everybody else. And it appalled me. Like, and it, like I said, it made no sense. It wasn't an appropriate use of force. It didn't make sense to have someone on the ground for 8 and 40 seconds, 8 minutes, whatever it was, you know, for no reason at all, totally unjustified, and contributing to his death, you know, like. So I looked at that as a police officer and said, yeah, that was a problem. And I don't know one police officer that thought that was okay. It's not like this was some split-second decision where it's, you know, like life and death, and, you know, things have to be evaluated. People, what they encountered has to be taken into consideration. That wasn't like that at all. It was a murder, and he was appropriately charged. How that affected us is the civil engagement that it caused. Okay, and we're all aware of that. There was some, you know, across the country, including here. You formed a group as a result of that. So that affected us in the fact that we had protests here that we, you know, facilitated, several of them, you know, maybe like 8 in a time frame, things that we had never seen. And it caused engagement between the community and our police department and me personally, you know, through all that. And I'll tell you this, and I've told the mayor this, I've said it publicly before, I probably told you this. I don't look at it as all bad. There's some good things that came out of the civil unrest and community engagement that happened during that time frame. And some of it, to me personally, like I got to talk to a lot of people that were organizing these protests and stuff like that. I got to have a personal relationship with them, spend time with them, talk to them. We had a particular group in town here a lot of people who I know, most of them of color, that, and some of you probably attended this, and we helped them facilitate it. And at the event itself, I had some great conversations with people, and it affected me personally because it's just what we needed as a profession. We, the profession took a big hit as a result of, some really bad behavior, and rightfully so. I'm not making an excuse. But it was a tough time to be a cop and to be understood. And my takeaway from these protests and the people I dealt with personally was good. They made me feel better about being a police officer. I had, we had an event at the A field, and I stayed for the entire thing. And as it emptied out, almost to a person, people I never met, someone I knew, came up to me and engaged me with very positive things, encouragement. And it's just, I was so glad that I was able to be there, because it, like I said, it affected me personally, that I felt supported by the people that were agents for change, right? That were looking at my profession and looking at me and saying, look, this got to change. This got to be different. We have to have a dialogue. We have to have trust, all those things. I got to engage with people at that level, and I walked away feeling really good about it. And a lot like, our conversations, Gail, that we've had, I feel the same way about it. It's not uncomfortable for me. It is, it's something that I never thought I'd see in my career. And when I got to do it, I'm glad I got to engage with people at that level, and to develop that empathy and understanding that people, and to hear them, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be heard, right? People want to be heard, and to engage at that level and be part of that. It was emotional for me. It was good. It was good. Like I didn't know what to expect, but man, I'll tell you, it was very positive. And you can't change the world unless you change yourself, right? You have to look at yourself in those situations, and it helped me do that.
Yeah,
And,
I was telling my husband about that, changing yourself. We were just having that conversation recently, and the song that comes to mind is Michael Jackson's "Man in the Mirror," right? And he says it: if you don't change
Yeah.
yourself, then you can't impact change around you. So, can you, either one of you can answer this question, but like, are there like maybe one or two specific items around policy or protocols that you've either instilled in your police department or enhanced?
I'll speak to that, and then maybe
Okay.
Larry can speak to it. Yeah, there's, we updated our policies to be compliant with, the law, and, the sign of the times too, like to include things like failure to act, right? So if you as a police officer, if a police officer is doing something and you're on the scene and you don't react to that and intervene when something wrong is being done, as in George Floyd, right? It was obvious that somebody could have put an end to that very quickly, and they didn't. Well, our policies now specifically state that you are duty bound to act in those situations. And, listen, those guys that didn't act were held criminally liable too. And that's an example. And we updated our policy in like strip search kind of thing that we're to protect the dignity of people, like if how they identify, or if they're transgender or things like that, like how to deal with someone that has a particular interest in who searches them, right? We've included that in our policy. Just those things, that the use of force, the no chokehold, we weren't allowed to do chokeholds anyway. But that specifically, those things were all addressed in policy. This civil unrest and conversation that was started led to some legislation that was passed that the chiefs of police have been supporting and trying to get passed for quite a while. And as a direct result of George Floyd and the anger and in this country about that and the preceding unrest led to the legislature passing things that we wanted done. Like, you know, we have new laws about training. We have new laws about mental health. We have a law that addresses in Pennsylvania, when a police officer separates from duty, it's kind of like they have a service record that can now be shared, which was never the case before. So you don't have a problem officer leaving one department and going to another, and that information couldn't be shared. We supported that, meaning the chiefs of police supported that legislation for a long time, and it happened. And you know, those kind of things, it's not unique to here. Every police department had to look at the way we did things. You know, we have onboard cameras, we have body cameras ordered. You know, these things are all no-brainers in today's society. And, you know, police have been reluctant for change. You know, they're like anybody else. They get in a little thing, they get insulated. And, but I can tell you right now, if you have a conversation with a police officer on the street, and I encourage you to do them, and you ask them about the body cameras,
Okay.
there's no pushback. You know what I mean? We understand, like, you know, this is how it needs to be done. And it's a benefit to us also. You know what I mean? Like that, you know, you get a story, not just your story, but the story, right?
All right, that's good. Next time I come across a Conshohocken police officer, I'm gonna ask him about those body cameras. Okay, I'm gonna jump a little bit and pivot to police tracking and reporting. So is Conshohocken Police Department tracking and reporting local and regional incidents of hate/racist acts in the colonial area and Montco-Philly region? For example, racial threats, and if so, what's being done about it within your span of control?
Okay. What do you mean by what's tracking mean to you? Like, yeah, like I'm aware of anything that gets reported to us, even on a routine basis. For the most part, I'm aware of, because I read reports and I talk to people here and stuff like that. And something like that came across your desk, and we had an incident like that within the past year, desecration of some cemeteries in the area. It was on the periphery of us, but most of it was in White Marsh or Plymouth Township. But our detectives were involved in that investigation. Unfortunately, they didn't identify the perpetrator in that case. I don't know what the motive was, but
to answer your question around what I mean by tracking, is just, you know, assuring that you're up to date, you're getting data on what's not just what's happening within your own police department, but right within Montgomery County, right? You're over 50 police departments, and so there's things, you know, happening, and more so, are you, you know, tracking it from the perspective of awareness? And then if there is any involvement from the CPD, what type of involvement is there?
Right. So yes, to answer your question, anything like this would be considered high profile to begin with. You know, like if that happened here or in this colonial area, we would all be aware of it. We, you know, the police share a lot of information by bulletin and stuff like that. There's certain, there's like a share group with the detectives, and they share this information all the time. So everybody has, and I belong to that too. And so there is an awareness of these things. When they happen, they come across loud and clear on the radar, and it gets a response. And if there's a crime committed, you know, in this borough that has some type of racial element or bigotry or anything like that, it would get top priority, and I would get all the resources I needed to help me, you know, from the surrounding departments also. So yeah, so these, and on a national level, you see things that happen, they make it to YouTube or Twitter, or you see them on the news or whatever. We have discussions all the time about these things, you know, like I talk to my officers, you know, and ask them if they saw, did you see this video? You know what I mean? And I still see things. involving the police that make it to social media, and then I scratch my head. I'm like, what are these people doing? Like, where have they been? You know, like, some
Is
of them,
there an opportunity, even though when things aren't necessarily happening in your space, it feels like there's an opportunity as a lesson learned of what not to do.
oh,
As a
absolutely.
police department.
That's a
So
good way.
is that something that you are instilling within your department to use it as a space for your officers in terms of lesson? Because sometimes we do learn from experience so that it doesn't happen, and that happens on a personal level. So within your department, is that something that you are able to take advantage of?
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, a lot of it's discussion because listen, you want to be ahead of these things because you don't want it affecting you. Our relationship with our community is everything. All of our authority comes from the community. And if you don't pay attention to these things and be proactive in dealing with them, then you're missing the mark because you can fracture the relationship with your community, like, and you have to be sensitive to these things. And it's these things get a lot of attention, as they should, and we should be on top of them, whenever it affects us or in the area, and try and avoid affecting our relationship with the people we serve. I don't hear. You hear?
Gail, we don't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Gail.
Sorry, I muted myself so that I
Okay.
wouldn't interrupt George, so I apologize. Thank you for letting me know. I said I'm going to pivot over to reporting, regular reporting data. So can you provide the process and protocols for reporting out data regarding demographics of things like traffic stops, tickets, arrests, and charges? And then secondary to that is, how can CPD report regularly without names to protect privacy, meaning that report out to the community? And so if you could answer that question for us.
Oh, okay. So with our modern systems of report writing and computers and things like that, it's information like that is readily available, and I am aware of what our stats are. I am considering a year-end report with those things in them, like so I can give you an example. I can tell you what the makeup of our traffic stops are based on race, and what our arrest data is regarding race. I know what that is now. I haven't released that in any kind of report, but our conversations lately, right, Mayor, we've talked about these things, and maybe it's a good idea to say, okay, this is how many Conshohocken Police Department arrests were made, and this is the racial makeup of them. And right now, the way it is with traffic stops, it's about 75% white and 25% black, and our arrest data is almost exactly the same. It's 26 and 74. That's not directly reflective of what our community is, which is I think it's 11% non-white. But in context, we get 40,000 people a day in cars that come through this town. I don't know I couldn't tell you what the identity, the racial makeup of motorists going through the town are per se, but I can tell you what we do, what our data is. And I'm not against releasing that in an annual report along with other data.
And then similar to what I had mentioned in terms of the data, and even though the data hasn't been necessarily released to the public at this point, but how are you utilizing that data as part of whether it's a training for your police officers, or to inform other policies that you may have?
Well, the best way I can answer that, Gail, is that, listen, I can look at that data and know what historically it is and see if there's trends. And you can break that down to individual officers or stuff, you know, if you take the time to do it on in your report writing system. So, you know, like the data can present to me what the trends are, what's normal and what the trends are, you know, happening, and you know, could raise a red flag maybe to me, like say, why are these numbers skewed? You know, why, if they're historically they're this and they're like now they're this, why? What's the cause of that? You know what I mean? Like what happened to skew the numbers or whatever. I mean, that's how I would use data like that.
Okay.
I can say,
So is that how you're currently using the data? Is that what you're saying? Is that how you're currently using the data?
yeah, that's a use of the data that I have
Okay.
that I can present to you right now.
Okay, got it.
Gail, if I can just add to that.
Yes.
Council and myself do receive a monthly update with those statistics. One of the pieces of information that came out during our meetings together is that, yes, I oversee, supervise the police. It's nebulous in the borough code what that means, but what's crystal clear is who has the power to hire and fire within the police department and who sets the budget within the police department, and that is our council members. So you have 8 directly elected officials overseeing the police department and receiving that data. So going beyond the scope of just police policies and trainings and trends that chief sees, you're also getting into policies and laws that council is enacting. So, so there are different layers and levels of protections and oversight.
I would add to that also, Gail, that we issue a report to council on Friday for the week, and then on Monday for the weekend. So, and that's everything we do, everything that we do, everything that we do that's recorded ends up in a report, and they get it.
Okay. So I'm sure that myself and CAARSEA members in the community will be very interested in seeing that data if you have the opportunity to publicize that. So we'll look forward to seeing that data. I'm going to jump over to social media. This social media is the way of the world. It has its pros and cons, as we all know. So, you know, the local incidents are communicated and sometimes they get magnified in social media. Residents are sometimes left guessing about the safety of our own communities. How does the department go about keeping the public informed in these kinds of situations? And is there a role for a group like CAARSEA in serving as a liaison for community concerns? And a recent example is around the soapbox derby, which again, that things happened. People go right to social media then says people are saying what they know. It's not necessarily that they're providing false information, but they're providing what they know and maybe what they have experienced or saw at a specific. So if you could just enlighten us on, you know, how does the department go about keeping the public informed so that the information that gets to social media is as accurate as possible?
I got you. When I was a lieutenant, and you know, of course, social media had already existed, but police were just getting involved in, you know, having social media accounts and using them, you know, and so I was involved in researching that and doing the policy for it and all, and then immediately started posting things on Facebook and Twitter about like arrests that we made. You know, it's like the mugshot photos, like this. They say they catch a burglar, I'd put that up there, and immediately, and I wasn't alone. A lot of departments did this, and they no longer do it, just like we did. Because what the reaction that you got from the community was like, "Oh my God, what's happening. You know what I mean? They think because this person was arrested for sometimes serious crime that it magnified, you know, and started a conversation about what's going on. This didn't used to happen. Well, it always did. And we were putting it out there. So we kind of did away with the mugshot kind of things about social media and just use it for an information kind of thing. So the thing that happened on Soapbox, with that in mind, and my experience with social media and the community reaction to it, you know, so the 4th of July incident happens. I was informed of it. I was away at the time, but my sergeants called me and told me what happened, what's going on. And, you know, when I got back to work, you know, I got more information on the case, and the detectives were progressing in identifying this person. But at the time, to me, there was an incident, nothing, I wouldn't say nothing happened, because the people involved, it was a major thing. From a law enforcement perspective, you know, when it was all boiled down, it was, you know, a traffic violation. So the fact that there was a gun reported and stuff like that, that wasn't there, you know, that was reported to the police as a disturbance, and then a gun involved, a gunshot fired. None of that was true, but I just thought, you know, given my experience with alarming the community and stuff, it wasn't a good idea to talk about guns and things like that that weren't present. However, maybe I should have taken a different approach to that. You know, I'm not above lessons learned. You know, maybe, you know, talking to you guys and, you know, it being a topic and feeling that there could have been more information involved. You know, lesson learned. Maybe next time I'll look at that differently and say, hey, look, you know, in my mind, this wasn't a serious incident where guns were involved and, you know, people were a real threat, a true threat. To say, well, maybe there's the perception of threat and lack of information from me personally was not the right approach. Maybe I should, you know, I'll take that into consideration, you know, like how you guys, what you related to me and how you felt about that. And it really wouldn't be a big deal to put out a statement about it.
Great. And I think that's kind of where we would, you know, like to build upon, right? This is a step. Doing this town hall is a step. And then I think next step is just how do we partner, right? And there's many Facebook groups out there, but what we do know is that a lot of times when residents sometimes post on our Facebook, hey, are you aware of this? Or do you know about this? Sometimes we can get ahead of it based off of the relationships that we've built with you guys, the other police departments, and others in the community, like the council people. We can try to get ahead of it before it gets out of control on social media. So that's where liaisoning with a group like CAARSEA would be helpful. And so that's a whole another topic for another day. But just wanted to kind of put that out there as you know, a great option as we continue to serve the community in the different capacities.
And just briefly, you always hear the police whining about resources, right? Like there's never enough resources. You know, sometimes you are on your own. However, you know, yes, if something comes across your desk, Gail, call me or send me an email and I'll call you back and we'll talk about it. You know what I mean? It might be something I know nothing about.
Right.
And you're my resource.
Right.
CAARSEA is a resource.
CAARSEA is the resource. Yeah. All right. So we are going to now switch over to our part two in terms of preparation. And so for all of those that are listening, we are going to watch a short vignette. And if you are aware, it is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, Emmanuel Acho. And this particular episode is the episode that he had with a local police department. So we're going to watch that and then we'll jump into some additional questions resulting from the vignette.
Nick, I'll go back to you. How do you feel when you hear the phrase Black Lives Matter?
Black lives do matter. We need to pay attention to some of the injustices that have happened over, the last 100 years and beyond. Where Black Lives Matter becomes confusing is when it becomes very divisive. Right now, in the midst of a political election, there's questions on whether Black Lives Matter is a social movement or is it a campaign. And I think when we pass the November elections, I think we need to focus on continuing it as a movement so we can create a successful outcome. Because if it ends on the election, then it was just a campaign.
You have some, I know.
Yeah, I mean, so the blue Lives Matter flag, right? The blue line, either on a flag or just black, blue, black, has taken on kind of a life of its own. Politically, currently, it's obviously flying on one side of the political boundary as opposed to the other. So when you see that, what do you see?
I feel frustrated because I feel as though the agenda is being moved. Here's what I mean by that. To say any life matters is to assert that we thought that life didn't matter. So to say that blue lives matter would then assert that historically we've acted as though cops' lives don't matter. Whereas Black Lives Matter, historically, we have literally acted as though Black lives don't matter. All men are created equal. Late 1700s, we donned that phrase. They weren't talking about black men, weren't talking about black women, weren't talking about women, but we said all men are created equal. So now it's like, wait a second. Just in case they're not talking about us this time, let's make sure we specify that Black lives matter. Ryan, earlier you mentioned preparation and you talked about funding and you talked about preparing as a unit to step onto the scene. What do you feel when you hear the phrase defund the police?
I think it means different things to different people. People who feel that, who want to literally take some of the responsibility we have as police officers and move it to somebody else. I'll be first in line to sign up for that. Like, go ahead, that's great, that's a great idea. So we get a lot of calls with people who have mental health crisis. Who's gonna go to those calls? If you have somebody that is able and willing to go to them, that's great. The problem is it's not black and white where it's like, oh, these are just mental health calls. If you have a mental health call with somebody and they have a knife, the social worker's not gonna go. Once we make the scene safe, then we call them and say, hey, I got so-and-so down here, can you come down here and talk to them and kind of work through their issues.
But defund the police doesn't upset you when you hear it.
Abolish the police upsets me, but defunding us, I mean, if other people can handle some of these calls, then that's fine. And again, if you're telling me there's a way somebody else can handle some of this stuff, I'm all for it.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard it like that before.
Manuel, for a long time, I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to take it. When I hear the defund thing, I feel like some of our communities are abandoning us. Prior to May 2020 and George Floyd, we were in the midst of a pandemic. We were doing the best we can for our community. People were showing up to the station, bringing us treats. We were heroes. After that, they want to defund us. It hurts.
Why does it hurt?
Because I feel like for 15 years, we've made, and I can speak to all my partners in the room, we've made a lot of sacrifices to be a part of the community, to try to help people. And it felt like people were turning their backs on us. We're not perfect, but I don't think we're at a point where we can just abandon what we've built. We want to be a part of the solution. We understand that the relationships are important, and inherently it's about trust.
Nick, can you speak to that? Because you are actively in the field. How it makes you feel knowing you're sacrificing every day in the field, but then you might come home and see on the news or see on social media that defund the police is being chanted around the world. How does that make you feel?
So my initial response was visceral and it made me upset. Moving forward, looking into what actually defunding the police is not abolishing the police or getting rid of the police. It's restructuring policing in America. 2 weeks ago, I was doing traffic control for a women's rally protest in March in the city of Petaluma. Many of the occupants of the rally had signs, defund the police. The interesting thing with our community is while they're holding signs, chanting defund the police, they're walking over and saying, thank you for your services and thank you for being out here. That's kind of a paradigm shift and threw me for a loop when somebody is coming and thanking me while they're holding a sign that I'm supposed to be offended by. again, it comes down to communication and dialogue and creating that opportunity. But it's not a scary term anymore.
Now, on a more broad scale, if you could communicate a more public message to Black children who live in fear of the police, what would you, Brandon McGovern, say?
That's incredibly difficult for me to say because all communities are different. But from an umbrella standpoint, we're here for you, right? Look at it. Look at us like a teacher. Look at us like a counselor. Like we want to be the person that you call, the person that when we show up, you run to us. It's like we're not there to be mean. We're there because we're here to help. And I want all of the kids to know. I mean, it's Black kids in particular pertaining to this is like we're there. We're here to help you. And I'm sorry that this is currently what you see us as.
You think we'll ever get to that point where Black children look to cops as helpers as opposed to as the enemy?
In my lifetime, no. It is coming way.
Thank you, Monica. So, Chief, I'm gonna ask you some of the same questions that were asked in this particular vignette. So, when you think about and you see or hear Black Lives Matter, what do you think when you see that? And also, what do you think about when you see and hear Blue Lives Matter?
Okay. In our preparation for this, you asked me this same question and I answered it prior to seeing this video. My answers were very similar, if you recall. I mean, you may have been thinking that at the time when being aware of the video when I was answering. So I'll reiterate what I said before. I won't let the video affect what my initial thoughts were. Black Lives Matter. I understand how it was born. I understand where it was come from. I never looked at it as an affront to me or my profession. And I did understand some of the rhetoric that went around with, like, I don't want to hear about all lives matter. Right? We're talking about Black lives. I understand that where that was born with the history of this country and the boiling point that things reached. And I have a personal story that I can share with you on those lines that might help you understand where I'm coming from. I have an uncle that I was very close to that died last year. And he was one generation from me, one generation away from me, helped raise me. He was in the United States Army in like around 1960 kind of era. And he was traveling in Virginia with some other troopers, and they pulled into a restaurant in Virginia, just a few hours down the road here. And the sign out there was no black served or no colored served or whatever the sign was. It was very apparent that the black troopers on that bus couldn't eat in that restaurant. Now they're serving in the United States Army, just like my uncle was. And he related that story to me a few times in my lifetime because of how it affected him personally. These are men one generation ago that are serving in the United States Army and were treated like that. And you hear things like that, the injustice of that, the unfairness of it, and the history of Jim Crow, not being able to vote, lynchings, all those kinds of things, that you can understand where the movement comes from, what's behind it, that it makes it different than all lives matter or blue lives matter. So as a movement, it does not offend me. It doesn't, it's no affront. It's kind of like a wake up call. You better listen to what people are trying to tell you. There's a message here. And like I said, you can't change the world unless you change yourself. So you have to listen and see where it's coming from. So I kind of disagree with that about the political thing. I never looked at it that way. Maybe it was used in politics, but I looked at it as more like a grassroots thing that was formed. George Floyd maybe being the latest act committed that led to this movement. But, I've had no problem, no issues with it. I don't get offended by the term. I understand where it came from and why it came about. As far as Blue Lives Matter, I really think that was I'm a little different from what they answered. I do think that was a direct pushback to Black Lives Matter. I think there was friction there that I don't know where it came from. I never heard the term prior to Black Lives Matter. So that'll say everything. I've heard of the thin blue line. That's been around for a long time, but I never heard of Black Lives or Blue Lives Matter. So the formation of and the prominence of Black Lives Matter throughout the country, I think led to some pushback with Blue Lives Matter. And, you know, as far as police lives, like I told you, they mean a lot to me. You know, I lead men here that are police officers. I was a police officer. My father was a police officer. And, you know, I see the great things that they do every day and the people they are and the coaches and all the things that they do. Their lives do matter to me. It's not a movement. It's just on a personal level, the relationship I have with other police. You know, so, you know, I think that was really just, you know, a pushback to Black Lives Matter. And if you don't believe that, I don't think you're being honest with yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty and transparency. And I just want to comment, because that was the first time that I heard your story in terms of your uncle, condolences. And then what I was going to comment on is when you started to tell the story and you talked about, you highlighted and emphasized that the Black people were all part of the United States Army. And you highlighted, you know, the fact that they were, you know, United States Army officers. And so, and this is not a question, it's just a comment, and it came to mind. Again, probably a whole nother subject for another session. However, what came to mind when you spoke of that was around the flag and how, you know, people felt issue when people gave the knee, when the sports figures gave the knee to the flag. And when I think about that particular story and your uncle's experience, right? And it's not necessarily just the flag itself, it's what the flag represents. Because if the flag is up, you're saying a pledge, and that pledge is supposed to be with liberty and justice for all. And that is not the experience of Black America. And so when people fall issue to why people, it's not a matter of respecting the flag. It's a matter of our experience and our experience in this country. And so I just wanted to mention that only because you had mentioned their position and being in the Army. So I'm going to jump over to the other question that was posed in the vignette, was around defunding the police. So what are your thoughts in regards to that?
Well, I think I was never offended by that either. However, it did confuse me because I'm a pretty literal person. My wife would support that 100%. If you say defund the police, that means, okay, so we're going to take either money or police away. So there's a budget and it's very manpower heavy. So you can either get rid of cops or just cut their resources, you know. So that didn't make sense to me in the literal sense of the term defund the police. And you know, if somebody would ever say to me, express their opinion about defunding the police, I would ask them, what does that mean to you? You know, like, because to me, it means getting rid of cops or getting rid of resources. Well, apparently, after our conversation, that doesn't necessarily ring true. It's about using resources to, you know, in other directions to help, you know, address some of these situations in our society and police in particular. So, you know, I get it. I think it's a bad slogan. Maybe because, like I said, and I told you that, I was like, well, that being the case, maybe that wasn't the perfect slogan to use, defund the police. And, you know, listen, these things don't offend me personally. They don't. I believe that we all have the right to express our opinions and be heard, and have our own views and be heard, and, you know, kneel at the Pledge of Allegiance if that's the thing. This is America. You have a right to do that. That's why it was never intended to be comfortable. You know, like if you want to kneel, and that's your right to do that. I support that 100%, 100%.
So one of the really good conversations we had when we were meeting with each other, this question came up, and I relayed a story to your police board about how when we were dealing with the aftermath of George Floyd, I got 2 very specific calls, emails, and messages. Hey, we need to defund the police. And hey, Mayor, we're not going to defund the police, right? And my response was the same to both. We don't, we're adults, we're professionals, we don't govern by bumper sticker. What we're going to do is we're going to sit down around a table, myself, chief, our council members, our administration, and we're going to talk about what this new reality looks like and how we can build not just a police force, but an entire infrastructure that helps to serve our residents in this new reality. So as usual, we seem to get pushed into these, you know, bumper sticker slogans, but I think in the reality of it, it was a lot of people with good intentions coming together, having meetings, and having real conversations about what our borough should look like.
Thank you for adding that as well. So, and a lot of times in this whole conversation thus far, something that has repeated itself is the dialogue aspect, right? Hence why we're doing this town hall. And if we continue to have dialogue, I think personally that, you know, we can be better. That this our area can be better, and so forth. You know, even outside of our area, dialogue is extremely important. And then I have one last question regarding the it's sort of related to the vignette. And we talked about it a little bit earlier around partnerships, but there is an opportunity for police to understand the needs of the community and our desires, specifically, you know, the Black and people of color. What is your willingness to enter into a partnership, and not just with CAARSEA, but the community itself around understanding the needs of the community? You're on mute.
Sorry.
No problem.
Well, listen, I think what we're doing right now, you know, is a step in the right direction. That there is, I'm willing to talk to anybody, and I do. I talk to people all the time, you know, and our strength is our diversity, and you know, everything that the way we operate is having the trust of the community, and you know, anything that can make that better, I'm willing to do, you know, and I'm assuming that this is our first step, right? It's like with our relationship, and
Absolutely.
it's not uncomfortable, it's not scary, I welcome it. It's a good thing, you know, and you know, we serve our community. That's why we're here. And, you know, we have to constantly change, and it's going to be 30 years from now. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to be different, you know,
Right.
And hopefully these things that are so prominent now, that are being talked about and pushed, and, you know, will evolve in the future, and things will be better. We'll have better relationships. So you don't have to have a conversation with your child who is Black about dealing with the police that a white person wouldn't have. You know, we had this kind of, maybe that gets better. Will it ever be solved? I don't know. You know, maybe Jesus needs to come down here, you know, like, and have a say in all this. But I think I'm open to it, and I think this is a step in the right direction, and you know, we can move forward from here.
So I'll say there is hope, right? There is hope that, right, one day we won't have to have that conversation with our kids as a Black parent, and in terms of it being a different conversation. It should be the same conversation, and it should really be about respect and authority, as opposed to fearing for your life. So I have hope, and I hope that others have hope as well. So we are now at the point where we are taking questions from the audience. So I've been given a few questions thus far, so I'm going to jump into those. The first question is, Chief, can you speak to the best way to communicate with the police regarding planned social justice rallies? And by the way, I won't have any context to these questions because they're coming in, so I can try to interpret if it's not clear on the question. I'll read it again. It says, can you speak to the best way to involve / communicate with the police regarding planned social justice rallies?
You mean leading up to it, I guess? Like, and hey, listen, this is something I didn't have any experience with prior to George Floyd, right? Never. And I had a lot of experience with it. I talked to a lot of people, and listen, reach out to us. That's the thing, and we'll do what we can to facilitate your First Amendment right. I think we've proven at it. We've done it, and like I said, I can't say it enough. I've talked to people. I talked to one fellow that helped organize this one. I was on the phone with him for an hour, and he was organizing a protest about police behavior, basically. And I was a police officer for a very long time, sitting there talking to him. And I found out that his brother is a police officer in New Jersey. Like just having these conversations with people, you get their perspective. And I think I've proven that, we'll do that, and we'll help anybody and have a conversation about it, what your goal is, and we point on what we can do to help you. Just reach out. That's my point. Like I said, we have to reach back. You have to reach out, the community. So if you, the best answer I can give to that is, what we've already done and that we would do in the future. Hopefully hopefully things get better. Hopefully we don't see somebody getting murdered on TV, you know what I mean, by a police officer. I don't like to see these things. Hopefully it gets better.
I hope that none of us do, and that humanity side of all of us, kind of kicks in. No one, wants to see anyone being murdered.
And just to jump off that, I know it can be intimidating to reach out to the police. I get it. I still get intimidated. So please use me as a resource. Feel free to whatever, any of the many ways to get in contact with me, and I can help facilitate a conversation or break the ice. If that's an easier way to get a touch point with the department.
And for both of you, your information is on the borough website for the audience to know. Okay, so that information is on their website, but we can also share that as part of the questions. So we will not get to all of the questions. I want to say this before I continue with some of the Q&A. We typically have gotten lots of questions through this forum, so we will not get to all of them. But what we will do is we will collect the questions and we will send them both to Chief and Mayor, and if you can answer them on the side, and we can send the responses back. The second question that came in is, were the residents in Conshohocken over the past 2 years, such as the incidents in Conshohocken over the past 2 years, such as vandalism, racially motivated threats toward the residents in the area being tracked? I'm assuming that this goes back to the question we were talking about around report tracking of data. You're on mute, Chief. You're on mute, Chief.
Sorry, you kind of cut out there in the middle. I didn't get the whole question.
Oh, I apologize. I said, so were the incidents in Conshohocken over the past 2 years, such as vandalism, racially motivated threats toward the residents in the area being tracked?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm aware of anything that like this that happens, like, and I'm very sensitive to it, and in Pennsylvania, people talk about the hate crime, like that's a broad term, but in Pennsylvania, it's an enhancement. So in other words, criminal mischief is a crime. If it is motivated by race and you can prove that, then there's an enhancement to the crime. That's called ethnic intimidation, right? So anything that would involve any kind of ethnic intimidation, or even the hint of it, like the vandalism at these cemeteries, that appeared, you never know who's doing it or what's in somebody's heart, but that appeared to be have that kind of most ethnic or racial motivation. So, and that became a big deal for us, all three chiefs. And yeah, so like if something like that happens, rest assured, it's going to get our full attention and we'll know about it. It's not like a parking complaint. I might not read a parking complaint when I see the heading, but I'll read about, vandalism or something that's racially charged. And my staff, the people that work here, would bring that to my attention immediately.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do the police feel when people are pulled over to record stops or other occurrences with people of color? And I know you and I have had this, we had a brief conversation about this, and you alluded to it earlier in terms of what we said is the hope that that experience is not different. But if you can
Well,
unpack that question.
okay, I can't speak for how all police feel. I'll tell you how I feel and what my perception is. Number one, when you walk out the door and climb in that police car and go out on the street, rest assured you're being recorded, because we use this data all the time when we try and solve crimes. We go find the cameras and all that stuff. So just assume that everything you do is being recorded anyway. So it is common now for people to videotape the police when they're acting in their capacity, or even if they're not, if they're just out on the street. People, well, everybody has a phone. This isn't a phone, it's a computer with a camera on it, right? And that everybody has that, and they're using it regularly. And we are too, we're recording ourselves out there doing a job. So I guess the sentiment when cameras became a new thing, I would say that police probably felt different than they feel about it today. Where you thought that somebody was creeping on you or whatever, or trying to be malicious or use it against you. That doesn't exist. Everything is being recorded. People all have phones. We see it all the time. We gather that data ourselves. So, I can't speak for everyone, but it's just a way of life for all of us right now. And I don't think police have any. I don't think it's just expected, they don't have any ill feelings towards being recorded, because we're like I said, we're recording ourselves. So that's the best I can answer that. And I can't speak for everybody. You might find a cop that has a problem with it, but I think generally you don't.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. Sorry about that. Next question, a little bit of a longer question. So this question states that the Washington Fire Company in Conshohocken flies a thin red line flag, and I believe a thin blue line flag as well. They also have "We support Conshohocken Police" and "Cops Lives Matter" signs in their windows. This can be offensive to Blacks and people of color, as well as alienate them. Can you or mayor speak to an entity like a local fire department that serves our community by publicly displaying these types of paraphernalia? And I guess, are you aware that particular fire company is doing that?
Okay. Well, we were both not aware. I get questions like this often, more on the residential side. there's a flag up and it has the F word involving a former president, things like that. Unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with free speech. We can't regulate anything that has a political connotation to it. So one of the rules I learned is the berm between the sidewalk and the street. You can't put signs up in. So it's for utilities to access, it's for trash. But if you put a political sign up, there's nothing we can do because it's political free speech. So unfortunately, sometimes I have to give that answer of, look, it's terrible, I don't agree with it, but it is free speech, and that's where sometimes we have to leave the conversation. Anything you'd add to that, George?
I would add that I'm not aware. I'll take a look at that down there. And would only other add that the Washington Fire Company is its own entity. I do believe that if you needed help, they would come regardless of your color. But you know what? I'll take a look at that because I wasn't aware of that. I have to see the thin red flag. I've seen that around, and that's just, I guess police or firefighters saying that their lives matter too. I don't have an answer for it. They want to get in on it too. Somebody wanted to sell flags, but I'll take a look at that. I'll look at the building and see if that's there or not. I haven't noticed that. And maybe I can have a conversation with the people down there. I'm not going to tell them what to do, but I can make them aware that it came up in this group and we're talking about it. And obviously somebody took the time to notice it and pass it along with their feelings. Like I said, they're their own entity. And I do believe that if somebody dialed 911 because they needed help or there was a fire, that they would show up and do the best that they could to help you regardless of your race or whatever.
Yeah, so I appreciate, that was my ask was going to be if you could, follow up with the fire company in that regards, and maybe just, like you said, have a conversation that it did come up in this meeting. And guess what? If they're willing to also have a conversation with us, we can, because we've been down this road specifically around the blue thin line piece of it, and we've had that conversation. The end result was that it was taken down with another situation, and it was taken down. The person did the research and found out why it is offensive to blacks and people of color, and so they were willing to take that down. So dialogue again is key, and so sometimes people are following a specific fad that's going on and don't realize how offensive it can be to a certain group of people. So I appreciate you taking that action and having the conversation. Again, I get that you may not be able to control their response, but at least taking the step to have the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
I apologize. I started talking and I just want to make sure I get get all the questions to the thing. Okay, so can you speak to how you advise or instruct your officers to handle being recorded? I think it was in response probably to your response to the other question. So if you can specifically talk to how you advise your instruct your officers on how to handle being recorded. You're a mute.
Record it, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Record.
record.
Sorry.
I didn't know if you were saying record it or report it.
Oh, yeah, record it. Yes.
Yeah. Listen, this is the world we live in. They understand that. They understand it probably to a degree that more than me, because I don't work on the street much anymore. And if I stop you for some kind of traffic violation, man, you really did something wrong. But they, they live in this world and they're aware of it. And, you know, the instructions you have is this is part of your life, you know, like you just expect to be recorded. I don't think that they, you know, I don't think that they have any bad feelings about it at all. It's just the way things, I'll bet you every day, at least once today, one of these officers was recorded talking to somebody or stopping someone or, you know, investigating an accident or whatever. You know what I mean? It's the world that they live in and they understand it. And I don't think that they have any feeling either way about it. It's just how it is, you know, like I have a nephew that's in the State Police Academy right now. And I said to him, it's different for you because you're coming into this world of policing different than I did, almost 40 years removed. So the way they're trained, their expectations, their accountability is all different. And they're coming in at the ground level. So like if you talk to a guy like him that's starting brand new, he knows that everywhere he goes, he's getting recorded. He's recording himself. People are recording him. You know, it's not a bad thing. It really isn't a bad thing. You know, there's accountability there, you know, so you have to be on your best behavior and your toes all the time and the way you treat people and talk to people, or it's going to end up on my desk. Right. And then I might not be happy about it. And they all know that. On the flip side, it can help you too. Somebody can have a story and say, well, you know, that's not exactly true. This is the video of it. And, you know, it supports whatever the officer is saying. So, you know, I'll say it again, I'm redundant, but it's just the world we live in. And yeah, they all expect to be recorded in everything they do. They're recorded in here, not their voice, but everything that they do inside this building is recorded.
So we have, well, we're almost at the end. I don't have any real additional new questions. I just wanted to piggyback off the previous conversation around the more so training. So you just mentioned that the newer officers, you know, they've trained, so they have a certain expectation coming out of their initial training. Is that same type of training being reciprocated back to officers that, you know, are have more tenure? So and what I'm saying, basically, hey, you go to the academy, this is what you get trained in. Is that same training then brought to officers that have a little bit more tenure? And is that required, or is that based off of the specific police department?
No, I think it is required to some extent now with the passage of these laws. We just all did it this year with use of force and de-escalation training. Like de-escalation is a term that's more recent in my career than it was in the beginning. I think police were doing that anyway. They had different names for it, verbal judo and things like that. But you know, it's not a new concept, but it's something it's mandated now that everybody's going through it. And if you are in this job for any more than 3 years, you recognize the importance of being flexible and adaptive and welcoming training. And I think that's across the board, that it's been like that. And yeah, we do train regularly. And I wanted to mention this to you before I forget, to all of you. We have a use of force simulator here in the department. My predecessor, before he left, got it for us because he felt the importance. And it's this judgmental kind of training that you offer. It's you stand in front of a video and there's audio and the scenario plays out in front of you, and then you have to use your verbal skills, and the instructor can then change the scenario based on your actions or inactions or whatever. And, you know, then you may end up in a situation where you have to use an appropriate amount of force or no force at all. We have that here. We train to it regularly. We have a couple instructors, and we do it as professional development type training when they're working, like on night shift and stuff like that. They'll bring an officer in and run them through all these scenarios. Excuse me, the scenarios change all the time. They're really good, and I'm offering it to you. Anybody from CAARSEA wants to be involved, I'll get my instructors together and we can run you through this kind of training so you can see it firsthand. And it is fun, and there's no judgment. You know, like you make the mistakes in training so you can talk about it and move on from there, right? So like, if anybody's interested in a little judgmental training at our police department, you know, we'll host you, and you know, maybe you can get to know a couple more of us better too, you know, and it is fun, and some of it's eye-opening, and we offer that to departments in the area because everybody doesn't have one of these setups that we have. We're fortunate to have it. We use it all the time, and we offer it to other departments that you know, that want to come here and train. We'll get them up to speed and they can use it too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm pretty sure that we will take advantage of that opportunity. We had a few of our members participate in the Plymouth Citizens Academy over, I think it was 12 weeks, maybe. I could be wrong, but they participated in the Plymouth Police Citizens Academy, and that was pretty awesome for us to be able to participate. And also coming out of that, there were some additional, you know, items that we were able to kind of pull out and have some more dialogue with Chief John. So we are at the end of our time in terms of the questions and the Q&A. And so I want to thank you both for participating in this town hall. We truly appreciate it, and we are looking forward to additional dialogue. I know there were a couple of items that we definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into that came out of the responses here. And I'm going to now turn it back over to Bridget so she can officially close us out.
Thanks, Gail. A reminder, if your question wasn't answered this evening, please know everything's recorded, as we've reminded you a few times. We'll be submitting them all to the chief and to Mary Yaniv after this. If you'd like to send us a question offline that you've just thought of or didn't feel comfortable asking right now, please send it straight to our email account at CAARSEA@gmail.com, or you can contact us any way you want on Facebook, on Instagram, we're everywhere. It's really important we hear from you and that we stay in touch so that you can join us at further events. We thank you for being part of the conversation. Tonight was just the beginning. As the chief had said, this is a first step to an ongoing important dialogue. And it's a convo that's not always easy, but it's critical to the well-being, safety, and quality of life of all residents here in the colonial area, especially Conshohocken tonight. So the moments must continue, and I speak on behalf of our board when I say we are committed every single day to working toward a safer, more equitable community for our Black and Brown neighbors. Thank you all again. Good night, and don't forget to vote on November 8th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone. Good night.
Good night.